Well, basically, if we go from 86 to 89, all the flyers are graffiti. All the straight edge bands in Connecticut, all Smorgasbord, all the graffiti stuff, man, up front, and they're the white kids from Connecticut.
There was this really strong, particularly strong connection with Burn, Absolution, Connecticut, the Anthrax. Then there's guys like Cycle and Gaze and Emit, and all of these Connecticut guys who were either into hardcore or loosely into hardcore. And then those guys kind of knew guys like Rise in Boston, 2 hours further up. And then those guys all knew guys from Philly and DC loosely, because now the zines started to have like a graffiti influence. And then there was already a scene of like graffiti zines, and now like the hardcore zines and the graffiti zines were kind of linking up.
People always consider graffiti to be like black urban art, which to a degree it is, but some of your best, most artistic writers were Caucasian.
I think graffiti is used more now in hardcore than it ever was, because there's more kids growing up with it being in their consciousnness.
It's funny because I give props to anyone that did what I did. I give props, even the guys I beef with, because a lot of kids, a lot of people laugh about. They ask me about this guy. Like, yo, those dudes used to kill shit. And hardcore music, DMS, we were on top. But there are other crews that did damage, like the TMR kids from Bayside. And no matter what, I just recently became friends with a lot of those dudes. Because over the years, we had beef over the years. But when I see them now, what am I going to do? Fight for something at 1987? But those dudes like Saint TMR, Scent, Red, all those dudes really fucking Nim and Voya, they were in Terminal Confusion. You know what I mean? But that's a hardcore band. They were all killing shit. Like 86, 87, 88, 89. Those years, Queens niggas were killing shit. We were killing shit. Me and MQ were killing shit. There's no one up more than MQ. For the beef MQ had, there was no one up more than MQ.
It was great times. Freddie used to come on tour with us, and we would have a blast, man. He would come in the van, and he was like a little kid back then. I first met Freddie. He was probably 7 or 8 years old, and he's like, I like your bands. 'Cause I think I was playing in Youth of Today at the time, or Straight Ahead. And we would talk, and then when I joined AF, he would come on the road, and Roger would mess with them back then, and we'd make him go do stuff, like crazy situations, and he was always like dead game to go out and do whatever. So it's crazy thinking about him now, you know what I mean? Like, he's like, this giant guy. I'm like, man, I hope he's not mad at me for that time that I just took half his sandwich. You know what I mean? You don't really know what's going on. But all kidding aside, man, it was really good times, and I made some seriously lifelong friends in that.
It was cool. It was great to see a band trying to bring that back, because if you remember at that time, New York hardcore was really dead in the late 80s going into that period. New York hardcore, there really wasn't a lot going on. So it was great to see a band like them carrying the torch and doing it,
I never really appreciated the whole fashionable aspect of it and the whole competitive aspect of, who's in control today and who can treat the other guy like shit. I never liked that. So hardcore lasting this long, it's almost like makes me smile thinking that the good guy kind of persevered and came out of it. The good guy meaning music like hardcore that isn't really pretentious.
We gotta stand up! Stand up! Get across! Stand up! Get across! Stand up! Get across!
I just think the whole energy of New York hardcore, right? The attitude of New York hardcore is what people were attracted to. It wasn't necessarily the bands as much as it was the energy of the fans. When I met those guys in Anthrax, it was the weekend that it was the 2 Metallica shows at Lemoore. And it was Anthrax and Metallica hanging out together. And I remember seeing them standing by, where you came into CBGB's, there was that first area behind the bar with the wood, and they were all huddled in that corner like a chicken coop. And they were really scared. I mean, it was obvious they were nervous. I was there with Kabula, and Kabula walked up to me and said, some guys are gonna beat up these guys with long hair over here. I was asking him, who are the fucking guys with long hair? And he said to me, those are the guys I played you the record I was like, "Are you really?" And I walked over and I said hello to them, and I walked up to them and they were like shaking. They're like this, big wide eyes. I mean, I was a skinhead. I was in good shape back then. I was shaped like a bodybuilder, not a keg. I mean, those guys were really nervous, and I felt badly for them. It's not been one of my strong points, is to victimize people, even though that's what I'm known for. So I basically had said to them, please, if you guys are worried, we'll take care of it. No one's gonna fuck with you. And a couple of the guys that were gonna beat them up, we walked up to, it was me, Kabula, and Big Charlie Hawkins. We were like, dude, you guys could leave and come back, or we're gonna have a problem. You're not gonna touch anyone with long hair. They were calling them Zepp heads.
Crossover became a term that, just like punk rock was a term invented by the media, the press. Crossover was just a term invented by, I don't know who fucking invented it, probably Chris Williamson or something. It was just the merging of two aggressive styles of rock music, really. That's all it really was. Crossover was just the merging of the harder side of metal with hardcore.
I think S.O.D popped, and then all these bands started playing this style, and so some person said to the record label that they were working with, whether it was Combat Core or whatever, Metal Blade, and said, here's a new crossover style band like S.O.D, or like DRI, or like the Crumbsuckers. I mean, basically, that's the funny thing. I never heard crossover till after like the band was done. Like 88, I was like, crossover, what the fuck is that?
Well, I mean, labels are labels. I mean, you have to have some kind of description of your sound. If somebody says, what do you guys like? I would say that we definitely could say that we weren't a pure thrash metal band by the time hardcore was an influence with us. Lyrically, it had a big impact on us. We haven't gotten around to that yet. When we realized that you could have this intense music and have a message behind it, that blew our minds, because when we first came out, we were just writing generic bullshit thrash metal lyrics, which were basically just something to fill a gap. You gotta have lyrics over the music, and so we're gonna write about violence and swords and whatever, because that's what we grew up on. And it really had an intense effect on us when we looked at the lyrics to Victim in Pain and albums like that.
I'll never forget being in Europe with Danny Lilker, and they let him board a plane with a 6-foot sword. I said, did you realize that guy's got a sword? And they say, he looks harmless. I was like, oh, his face is gray from the death metal paint he put on, or black metal panda makeup, and he's got a 6-foot broadsword on the plane. I was like, it's over.
And the scene that grew up around us was amazing. And it was great, because I remember being in Youth of Today, and we want to get gigs in New York, and I remember like Johnny Stiff coming up to us going like, you might get gigs, but New York will never accept a straight edge movement. So, and then, Ray was just like, okay, well, watch us, and nothing more punk rock than that, man. Nothing more punk rock than a guy come up and say, you're never going to do this, kid. And then saying, okay, well, just sit back and watch. And look what happened.
I don't know if I said just watch. He did say that to me. He said, New York will never be straight edge. Like he was almost like, you guys, it's very cute that you guys are straight edge, but if you think you're going to clean up New York, you can forget it. I was just determined that that's what I was. I was just fixed, and that's my identity. I don't do drugs. I'm not interested in it. I've got better things to do with my life.